So far, in his second term, President Trump has publicly berated Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in the Oval Office, repeatedly called for Canada to become the 51st state, initiated a global trade war, captured Venezuela's president and promised to, quote, run that country, launched strikes on Iran and Syria, and just over the weekend threatened more tariffs on our closest allies unless he was given Greenland. Writing in The Atlantic, Robert Kagan argues that the president's behavior and abandoning of U.S. allies could signal the collapse of the American-led world order as we know it, warning, quote, Americans are entering the most dangerous world they have known since World War II, one that will make the Cold War look like child's play and the post-Cold War look like paradise. Oh, joy. Joining us, contributing writer for The Atlantic and senior fellow at the Brookings Institution, Robert Kagan. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
So what exactly is Donald Trump's doctrine here? What exactly is he trying to do?
I think Donald Trump's only doctrine is power. I think he wants to dominate. People talk about him as being transactional. He's not transactional. He wants every transaction to end with you admitting that he is more powerful than you and can do what he wants. And the Greenland example is a perfect illustration of this. The United States can do anything it wants to do in Greenland in terms of protecting it from Russia or China or any other potential threat with the full cooperation of long-standing and reliable allies like Denmark. He doesn't want that. He wants to take it. He wants to commit an act of territorial aggression against an American ally. So for him, I just think he wants to be world emperor and be able to basically boss around every country that is willing to be bossed around. Of course, he's not in the business of bossing around tough countries like Vladimir Putin's Russia or Xi Jinping's China.
Here's the thing, Robert. The United States is very powerful and has been very powerful now for 70, 80 years, more than that. Perhaps more powerful today or with our allies than ever. So Donald Trump's trying to pursue power. Is it actually power, or is it just the emotional experience of what he thinks power is?
Yeah, well, I don't want to climb too deeply into his head, but the point that you're making is right in the sense that we need to understand that American power in the world is not just or even primarily about its raw power. We have a very strong economy. We can bully others. We have a very strong military. We can take actions like we took in Venezuela. But the real source of American power over the past 80 years has been our relationships with our strategic allies and partners around the world. That has been what they call a force multiplier, and it has really been the reason that we've been able to maintain peace among the great powers for 80 years since the end of World War II. And even though Trump is now benefiting from the power that we've accumulated over those many decades, he's also at the very same time depleting it. And the point of my essay is that the truth is, since so much of our power does rest on our relations with these very rich and at one time very powerful great powers, we are now losing that, and we are going to drive our allies to no longer be our allies and to be great powers in themselves. And that takes us into a multipolar world of the kind that existed before 1945, and that is a much more dangerous world than Americans are used to.
You get into great detail in the article regarding that and the ways that it could, the world could break apart, and the buildup of militaries across Europe, and the way that they would push back against the United States, not just capitulate to what Donald Trump wants. Remind me again, and for anybody who wasn't around in the pre-1930, 1918 world, what was it like? I mean, were all of these nations, these empires, just living peacefully side by side and negotiating easily between these powers?
I mean, obviously, the answer to that is no. Anybody with a little bit of historical knowledge knows that, for one thing, there were not one, but two world wars between 1900 and 1945. But even in the 19th century, which I think you could argue was a more managed multipolar world, when you had diplomats like Bismarck in Germany and Metternich in Austria in the early part of the century, What people don't seem to remember is that there was almost in every single decade of the 19th century a major war involving two or more great powers. So even if we were to move back to a 19th century style world, it would mean major wars involving Russia, China, the United States, maybe Germany, maybe Japan, who I think are going to have to themselves become great powers if the United States is no longer providing security, and that it's just a much more dangerous world. And a lot of the things Americans depend on, like overseas bases and access to markets, are not going to be there.
Yeah, I mean, also our weapons are so different now, so we can't even compare what it was like then to what it could be like in the future. One of the things that you didn't fully contend with in your piece, and I'm curious to get your opinion with it now on it now, is economics. I mean, part of the reason why I wonder if it's as easy for Donald Trump to break these alliances as it may seem. The world is so economically dependent on itself. I mean, China is a superpower, yes, wants to be a bigger superpower, wants more territory, yes. But they're also heavily dependent on us to bolster their own economy. So are you made to feel better at all by how intertwined all of our economies are presently?
Well, first of all, I just want to say that that was the argument that a very famous writer before the First World War, his name was Norman Angell, and he made exactly that point, that the nations were so economically interdependent that no one could actually benefit from a war. That book was an international bestseller basically 2 years before World War I broke out. So I think one thing we've learned is that economics alone do not keep the peace. But I think the more important point is, yes, in a world where we are engaging in international commerce on a fairly even plane, where it's generally regarded as a relatively fair system, then those economic ties mean something. What the United States is engaged in now is the opposite of that. We are the ones putting up tariff barriers. And by the way, we are forcing other nations to channel their trade as much as they can away from us. Look at the agreement that Canada and China just signed. I think you'll see more Europeans turning toward China because of our tariffs. And one of the big lessons for those who founded our international order, people like Dean Acheson after World War II, America had also engaged in these kinds of aggressive tariff policies in the 1920s and 30s, which led to the creation of global economic blocs, which wound up being also strategic blocs that ultimately went to war with one another. One of the reasons we established a free trade regime after World War II was precisely to end this threat that they posed to international peace.
Robert Kagan, really good to have you. Really, really good to have you. Thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it, sir.